product management, I've been very curious about project management, what it does, what it entails, and the world of product management. So I've always been trying to find someone who is in that space. And I happened to run into an old friend of mine, Sidd, who I've known for, I would think, 15 to 20 years, approximately 15 to 20 years. So Sidd is a product manager, but I don't want to steal the thunder or the limelight here. So Sidd, over to you. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. As you said, I'm in product management. So I'm currently a director of product at Evernote. And I've been in product management for about 7 years right now. And, I started off with a software engineering background that certainly helped. But I've been doing product management at scale. When I say at scale, it's like going to millions of customers every single time. And I've been doing that for over 7 years right now. Yeah, so that's me.
What is product management? What does a product manager even do?
That's an interesting question, right? I think that answer actually evolves as your career grows. So when I first started off, if I had to tell someone who's a beginner who doesn't have an idea of what product management is, it's a combination of three things. One is adding value to the user. Two is adding value to the business. And three is looking at the cost associated. And the cost associated is mainly associated with the technology aspect of it, which requires development effort, which requires QA effort. And it also requires some customer support, but you could look at that as either a value aspect or a cost aspect. But it's balancing these three that actually makes what product management is. And that's a very high level sort of basic idea of what product management does. But I think if I had to look at what product management has become for me, it's sort of an aspect of being water in the company. And when I say water, imagine these big boulders that you have inside the company that are pretty fixed, and they have you can look at these boulders as, let's say, projects, or you can look at them as product features, or you may look at them as the product itself. How do you navigate through this space and the stakeholders like water, where you can actually provide the lubrication that's required to move things forward in a way where you're delivering value to that end customer, because that water ultimately, or that value, needs to reach your end customer. Now, I have primarily worked in B2C, but I don't think this varies very much in B2B. And I've also been in product management for software. And I don't think this would actually vary that much for hardware. I think the life cycle of the product changes, but this whole aspect of delivering value to the user and the business while managing costs is a fundamental aspect of what product management is.
Beautiful. I really like the analogy of product management is like water, and how what it does to deliver value. I think it's an amazing analogy, Sidd. So there are two other pro space managements: project management and program management, and now there's product management. So can you tell us how does product management differ from the other pro managements, please?
Interesting that you call them pro managements. I guess you're pros when you're actually a professional when you're doing it. So if you had to look at what a project manager does, when you actually, let's say you have an idea, and you're actually going through an idea life cycle, right? So when you have an idea, it's a nascent idea. Nobody has thought about it, or someone has thought about it, but now is the time to actually take it to its end goal, where you're trying to explore whether this is actually something that's valuable in the market or not. I would say a product manager picks up that idea. So let's say you want to build feature X, and I can take any example here. Let's say you wanted to build stories on Instagram, right? That's your, let's say that's your product that you wanted to build. And you're like, hey, that's actually something I want to do because, people want to add real-time messages or real-time updates to their friends, which is not something that they are wanting to have as a permanent placement on their on their apps, because it doesn't communicate that value that they want long term. They just want something short and get it done, right? So you want, let's say you're a product manager, you would say, that's how I'm going to think about this, because there is a customer need for having, having this feature in place, because there is a need for the customer to communicate that outwardly. So you take that on, and then you start exploring what it would do for the user. You start exploring what it would do for the business, and in this case, it would probably be advertising. And then you would look at the technical cost. Maybe you have a team that says, maybe you have a team of 5 that's going to build this feature. And then when you actually take this on and you try to make it concrete, there are timelines associated. And when there are timelines associated, it's typically a specialist job to take that timeline and say, okay, I know how to take this this ambiguous thing that you have given to me and put it on some kind of a Gantt chart, and actually tell you that, okay, this is going to take this much time from end to end, and that is probably what I would say a project manager does. A project manager is also responsible for some of the processes that go into building a product in its entire life cycle. So you would make sure that all your due diligence is in place. You would say, okay, I need to actually have this checklist item done and that checklist item done, and it needs to go through this whole phase, so that the product manager is not cutting corners per se on some of the aspects that deliver, let's say, quality, or some of the aspects that think about how the entire universe of the company is operating, right? Because the product manager is typically operating in a silo. The project manager is probably thinking about this, from an end-to-end perspective. If I had to take this one step higher, then the program manager is saying, okay, is this product really something I want to, how does this fit in within the company itself? Am I going to put this block here? Am I going to put that block there? How many resources do I need for this feature versus that feature? And then you start doing those kind of trade-offs. And these are the 3 people that are, I guess, managing different aspects of the product delivery itself. And in some companies, these are very, very well defined roles. But if you are in a smaller company, the product manager is typically doing all of the aspects. He's probably managing the program, he's managing the project, all of that. If you go to a larger company, the product gets more complex, the risks get higher. And so that's where you actually have these 3 different entities operating.
So let's talk about the journey of becoming a product manager, right? So you have a unique journey of yourself, but from software engineering into product management. Is that the typical journey? Is that the right journey? You also have an MBA. Is MBA the journey? So can you maybe talk about how do people get into the space?
Yeah. So I came in from a software engineering background. I have an MBA, and that was the path that I carved for myself, right? But I don't think you need any kind of background, in software engineering or even in business to allow you to be in product management. I have met multiple product leaders and product managers through my career who've come from varied backgrounds. Some have psychology backgrounds, some have economics backgrounds. I've even had a product manager who was a pianist, right? And these are people that are able to manage the 3 aspects: the user, the business, and the tech cost. And as long as you're able to fully respect these 3, big boulders that are each trying to pull you in a certain direction and able to bring the company in balance, that's where you can become a good product manager. So you don't have to have a background. That said, if you have a background, you're able to appreciate that naturally because you were there. You were able to step in that person's shoes and understand the challenges that are associated. So I was a software engineer. I can easily relate to someone who is a developer and understand their pains, their actual message that they're trying to deliver. The MBA has helped me understand the business aspect a little better. So now that I'm in a SaaS business, I'm able to understand what it means to actually have a recurring subscription. What does it mean to have a drop off? What is the what is the yearly goal? What is the weekly goal? All of these aspects come together easily for me because I have had that background. Now, if I had a UX design background, I'd be able to appreciate the user even more. And that's something I've taken on as a natural, and sort of a natural interest. But if you had a natural interest for all of these three, there is no requirement for you to actually have any kind of background into product management.
Sid, you said something very profound here about the three boulders. Can you maybe quickly just talk about it? Because I just want me to understand what those three boulders are, but I also want people who are listening to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the three boulders are the user, the business, and the technology, right? And from the user standpoint, you're actually thinking about what are the features that they want, which enhances their value, or what are the features that they want that are breaking their workflows and you actually need to fix them. From the business aspect, you're thinking about two aspects. You're looking at the revenue and the costs, and you can increase your revenue by either raising your prices or by increasing the number of customers, or you could reduce your costs by doing multiple aspects in the company itself. And then you have the technology. The technology has you have to balance the long term versus the short term. Now, in the short term, you could say, I want to build this quickly and I want to get it out the door. But then that accumulates what's called as technical debt. So you need to balance the short term with the technical debt and try to accumulate as less debt as possible, because when you accumulate debt, you have to pay it off at some point, and that gets really expensive if you hold off for a long time.
Interesting. It almost seems to me like the role of a product manager is to also make some of these decisions as to how can I get my product out quickly, but how also can I manage such that I don't have a crazy amount of technical debt? Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. And you have to rely on partners to actually make this happen. The product manager knows everything but knows nothing as well, because you're relying on these experts who know much more than you, who understand either the technology better than you, or the business better than you, or the user better than you, and trying to make these decisions in a way where you're ultimately trying to take this company forward, not in the short term, but in the long term. Sometimes you have to make short-term decisions. There's no doubt about it. But then you're trying to take this company, forward in the long term. And when you're trying to manage the building part of it, what you're referring to is the execution arm of a product manager, right? If you look at the ideation versus the execution, this is the execution part of it, where you're saying, okay, I actually now need to put pen to paper. Hey, developer, you're actually trying to write code. So when you're writing this code, you need to build for this aspect, and this aspect. Or you need to say, no, you're just building for this aspect. I don't know whether this is actually something that's going to work in the market or not. It's not worth designing, the Taj Mahal for this. You can actually just design something that's a small house, and then we'll figure out whether we need to invest more in this space, or whether we are going to say, okay, this is done and dusted for now.
What makes for a successful product manager, Sid?
That's an interesting question. I would say that the two aspects that have defined my success are, one is a question and two is a skill. So the question is, how can I help? The question, and this question is not something you just ask internal stakeholders, but you're actually asking these questions to your customers, you're asking these questions to the business, and you're asking these questions to your developers. And then the second part is a skill, which is negotiation. Because when you ask this question, how can I help? Each one is going to tell you how you can help them. And they're going to ask for different things. And then you have to actually have the understanding of negotiation.
Yes.
Now, negotiation is not something that people inherently understand, because they think of negotiation as either haggling. That's one sort of bucket of people. And then there's another bucket of people that look at negotiation and say, oh, that's my way of getting the upper hand, right? Like you walk into let's say you walk into a car dealership, and the car dealer is actually giving you a price, and then you give another price. And then let's say you find he reduces it by $5,000, and you're like, oh, I got the upper hand. That's not That's not what negotiations about. Negotiations is about give and take. It's about making sure that it's a win-win situation. And I don't mean that word lightly. It's not like it's a 50-50 aspect. When it's a win-win, it's like trying to understand that person and saying, I'm going to do what you're asking me at the core of this. And then that person also understanding what you are asking for and understanding the core of what you are asking for, and then giving that a little bit. So it's that give and take process that, brings a feeling of camaraderie. And that, I would say, this question plus the negotiation aspects clearly define what a good product manager is. And often when a product manager is not doing well, it's either because they are negotiating poorly or they're not asking the question enough.
So let's discuss the yin and the yang of product management. What's the best part of being a product manager, Sid?
I would say the best part of being product management is how connected you are to the company and the user. These are two. One is external and one is internal. Like your company and your stakeholders are constantly coming to you and they're asking you questions. That's a great feeling to have because you're at the center of things and you're trying to actually manage this orchestra of sorts, right? You're the conductor when this orchestra is running, but everyone has their own skills as they're playing their instruments in this orchestra. But then you're also looking at the audience, which is your user, and saying, am I making you happy? And they're talking to you quite often one-on-one. They're talking to you via social, or they're talking to you via customer support, or they're talking to you one-on-one. There are many LinkedIn messages that I get saying, hey, why haven't you built that feature? And why haven't you built this feature? Now, you can look at that link message and say, hey, you're invading on my privacy. Why are you asking me this question? Or you could look at it as, hey, that's great. You're so invested in something that I am building that you're actually willing to reach out to me and say, why are you not building this? Or why, or why is this feature working a certain way or the other? And that, it's almost like you're the center of attention, but you're not. And it's not a narcissistic aspect that I'm talking about here. It's more like you have this responsibility on your shoulders and you're humbled by that aspect, but you're also trying to move the needle for all these people that are coming to you and saying, I want to help all of you. I want to make your lives better, all of them, including the internal and the external stakeholders. I think that piece is what the best part of product management is.
On that note, what's the most challenging part, Sid?
Yeah, I was expecting that question because it's the yin and yang. I would say that the most challenging part of being a product manager is that you are never really putting pen to paper. Everyone else is. A designer is doing the design. An architect is writing, is making the architecture of the technical, infrastructure that is being built. The developer is writing code. There are financial people that are making models, and you're in the middle of this, and you're saying, "Wow, that's a really good skill. I'd like to try that out," but you cannot because you don't have the time for that, or you need to change your career for that, and it's a little bit of a need or a want to look at someone who is building something and saying, I want to do that too, but you cannot step into that space because as soon as you step into that space, you're invading invading that space. There's no easy way to put that because people are proud of their work, and when someone who comes out of who's someone who's managing all of these aspects tries to come into their space, they feel like it's being micromanaged of sorts. And I feel like I miss that. I miss building with my own hand. And that's something I really enjoyed doing when I was a software engineer. I'd write code for hours together without even looking away from my screen. I can no longer do that. I would say that that's the most challenging part of being a product manager. I could tell you a lot of challenges associated with my work itself, but that's shallow. That's the core or the root of the challenge actually comes from this, where you're proud of your work, but you don't know which work to point to and say, oh, I actually did that piece.
So let's talk about, career progression for a product manager, Sid. What are typical next steps? So once someone is a product manager, what do they generally do after that? How does career growth or progression look like for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there is a good book actually that I'd recommend to your viewers. It's called Escaping the Build Trap. Um, it's a book intended to be for product management, but it's also a book about how the core of product management is not just about building something. The old saying of build it and they will come, that's become sort of a joke, because it doesn't work that way. You have to really deliver that value for the customer to come through. And in there is a nice graph that speaks to the different roles that are in a typical company. In a typical company that's of medium size, large size, you have a product manager, you have a senior product manager, and then you may have a director of product management, you may have a senior director of product management, you may have a VP of product management, and then you have a chief product officer, depending on whether the company is very product focused or not. These different levels are managing the balance between execution and vision. These are the two parts of it. And as you progress in your career, you execute less and you do more of that vision aspect. So a chief product officer is not writing any Jira tickets, but a product manager is probably writing all the Jira tickets. And that's the balance that is being maintained here. And the scope of work also increases as you go up the chain of sorts, because and when you start off, you're looking at one product or one feature or one surface like Android or iOS. And as you go up in your career, you're thinking about the entire product landscape, or you're looking at the product ecosystem, or you're saying, I want to look at the product strategy and the product ecosystem. So if you're going through the product career chain, this is how it would look. But I would say that in the current environment that we are in, especially in technology, especially in the technology product industry, a CPO is probably more likely to become a CEO than ever before, because the product itself is defining how the revenue is being generated. The product itself is defining how the business is now going to evolve in the next 10 years. And it's not uncommon to actually see product-oriented CEOs in the market right now. A classic example of this is Steve Jobs. He was a product-oriented CEO who cared a lot about the product itself, and that generated the value eventually. Of course, he was very good at handling the revenue pieces. He understood what moat is, et cetera, but it was the core product that defined how the company moved forward. And this is probably more commonplace today than ever before.
So you suggested a book. I'm going to leave the link in the description, but any other books, courses, blogs, podcasts, articles, anything that you would recommend to either current or aspiring product managers, Sid?
Yeah. So for a current product manager, I would recommend Escaping the Build Trap, and I would also recommend a negotiation book. It's called Never Split the Difference. It's a book by Chris Voss. He was a former FBI negotiator, and he shows you how to negotiate. And it's not rocket science, and it's not like you're trying to get the upper hand. It gives you the true value and the meaning of what negotiation is. For someone who's aspiring, I would start off with something like an Inspired. It's by Marty Kagan, or you could even start off with the autobiography of Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. I'm not a big Steve Jobs fan or anything of that sort. I know I've mentioned him twice already. But there is a core to him that you can actually look at within the autobiography, or rather the biography, and you can start to understand the inputs of what a product manager needs to have to deliver that ultimate value. And as long as you can keep building on that input, the output will just follow. So these are the two. And if you're really in some other career and you want to step into product management, I would recommend certain books like Cracking the PM Interview, etc., so that you can you can actually get to the execution part of the interviewing itself and be successful and get your foot in the door.
What is your advice, Sid, to aspiring product managers?
That's a good question. So there's a philosophy actually that I follow for everything that I do, including product management. It's called We Do Have. I don't know if you've heard of this, but the idea is to be something and then do something associated with that being, and then have what you want. So let's say you wanted to have this career of product management. Try to understand what are the things you need to do to be a product manager in the first place. But then to do those things effectively, you actually need to be a certain person. What is that being? Let's start with that being itself. Is, start to look at the small things. Start to look at the design of everyday things. Look at your glass and try to think about why it's designed this way. Look at your car and try to understand what are the things that might have gone into the cost of building this car. Look at maybe look at your paper and try to understand how was this manufactured? How is this coming at scale? How did this reach my house? Asking those questions and saying, I'm curious. I'm actually really, really curious about understanding these things that I'm using on a day-to-day basis will start to allow you to see the value that is being generated, the trade-offs that have been potentially made, and then you can really appreciate how you are going to evolve your career when you look at these aspects, because you'll naturally gravitate to certain products. You may naturally gravitate towards an aspect of, let's say, cost or design or like building holistically. And that becomes your niche. And then you can actually take that on and then do the things that are required to make you a product manager in that space. And then you can easily have that product management career.
I had, to be honest, I had not heard about the be, do, have philosophy, Sid, but it does sound very, very deep, and I'm going to think about this a little more and probably even use it in my life and career as well, Sid. So thank you. Yeah. So on that note, Sid, I think this was the list of questions that I had for you, and it was, I would say, very insightful, very eye-opening for me on a topic of something that's been very, I've had a lot of interest in that space, right? So I just want to say thanks a lot, Sid, for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Agnew. Thank you for having me on this show. I think, it's been illuminating for me too, as I've been speaking through this. So I hope this delivers the value, and I hope there are more product managers created through this podcast.
Thank you, Sid.